Every generation has a moment, a single point in time when the everyday world seems to stand still, and you know you're witnessing history. For America, one such moment came on a summer evening, thick with anticipation. A leader stood before a massive crowd, not just as a figure of a political era, but as the culmination of a family legacy that had journeyed across oceans and spanned centuries. This event wasn't about the cheering crowds or the bright lights. It was about symbolism. It was a powerful reminder of how ambition, opportunity, and sheer will can change the course of human history. To truly understand this turning point, we can't just look at the here and now. We need to travel back in time, far back to where this incredible story truly began. Long before the towering skyscrapers and the global headlines, there was a single, pivotal decision that set everything in motion: the choice to leave everything familiar behind and chase a new beginning in a distant, unknown land. Imagine this: in a quiet, peaceful village nestled among rolling hills and lush vineyards, a young dreamer made a choice that would echo for generations. He decided to cross an ocean, arriving with nothing but hope, to build a life from scratch, a life defined by courage and the willingness to reinvent himself. That one, simple, yet incredibly daring, decision was the true starting point of a legacy that would one day reach the highest echelons of power and influence. When he arrived in this new world, he was met with overwhelming uncertainty. But where there was uncertainty, there was also limitless possibility. Through relentless persistence and tireless hard work, he began to turn small, seemingly insignificant opportunities into lasting success. His journey embodied the timeless ideals of ambition, enterprise, and the pursuit of freedom principles that would become the very foundation of a multi-generational quest for progress. He wasn't just building a business. He was laying the groundwork for a dynasty. His children, and their children after them, carried that same torch forward, each adapting his original vision to the challenges and opportunities of their own time. They built homes, expanded businesses, and established a name that would soon become synonymous with achievement and resilience. With each passing generation, a new layer was added to the family's growing legacy, proving that the true essence of opportunity isn't just about starting over, but about constantly reinventing oneself. From the most humble of beginnings to a position of enduring, global influence. This is ultimately a story about the unstoppable power of the human will. It's about the unbroken thread that connects a distant past to our living present. It serves as a profound reminder that history isn't shaped by a single, grand event or one famous person. Instead, it's forged in the quiet moments of uncertainty. When courage manages to outweigh fear, and a choice is made to push forward against all odds. What began as one man's voyage of hope, fueled by little more than a dream, evolved into an epic saga of ambition, innovation, and unwavering determination. It's a story that reflects not just the remarkable rise of one family, but the endless, universal drive within all of us to reach for something greater, to strive beyond what seems possible and to leave our own mark on the world. Every great story begins long before anyone recognizes its importance. The story of this family, one of ambition, movement, and reinvention, began in the heart of Europe, in a small village surrounded by rolling hills and vineyards. Life there was quiet, traditional, and bound by routine. Yet, within that ordinary world lived a young man whose imagination reached far beyond the edges of the map. He grew up hearing stories about distant lands across the ocean, about streets filled with opportunity, and cities where dreams could be built from nothing. For many, such tales were just fantasies. But for him, they became a calling. The idea of starting anew, in a place where ambition mattered more than ancestry, ignited something powerful inside him. One morning, he made a choice that would echo through generations. With little more than determination and courage, he left behind his home, his family, and everything he knew. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he believed that beyond the horizon waited a place where hard work could change one's destiny. When he arrived in the new world, it was not what he expected. The streets were crowded, the language was unfamiliar, and opportunity had to be fought for. But he adapted. He learned quickly that success came not to those who waited, but to those who acted. He began with simple work-long hours, small pay, and few guarantees. Yet through each setback, he gained something more valuable than money: experience, perspective, and a deep understanding of what people wanted. That insight would become the foundation of everything that followed. Over the years, his work evolved from surviving to building. He learned how to recognize potential in land, in people, and in moments of change. Bit by bit, he transformed modest beginnings into small enterprises, creating not only income but stability. He started to see how vision and persistence could turn even the smallest ideas into lasting foundations. When he returned to his homeland years later, he was no longer the same young man who had left. He had discovered not only a new world, but a new version of himself. Yet the land he once called home had changed. As well, traditions remained strong, but opportunities were still limited. So he made one final, defining choice: to return permanently to the place that had given him the freedom to grow. That decision to build a life in the new world became the starting point of a family legacy. It was no longer just about one person's dream, but about the generations that would follow. He settled in a growing city filled with immigrants just like himself, dreamers, workers, inventors, and builders. Together, they created neighborhoods, businesses, and communities that defined the spirit of a young nation. His story became one thread in the greater fabric of the American story, one of courage, reinvention, and endless possibility. Decades later, those who carried his name would continue his pursuit of growth and change. They would build higher, think bigger, and push further than he ever could have imagined. But every great achievement would always trace its roots back to this one moment, to one person's choice to cross an ocean in search of a dream. Because history often begins not with power or wealth, but with courage, the courage to take a single step toward the unknown. The dream that began with a single journey across the ocean was just the start. It didn't end with one man's search for survival. It grew, generation by generation, transforming into a relentless pursuit of creation. The children of that first dreamer inherited more than just his determination. They inherited his vision, the rare ability to see incredible potential where others saw only empty space. As the 20th century dawned, the world was crackling with change. Cities were exploding outwards, skylines were reaching upwards, and the very definition of success was being rewritten. In neighborhoods teeming with newcomers, opportunity wasn't just found, it was built. It was in shaping the physical world where people would live, work, and chase their own futures. This was a challenge the second generation took to heart. With meticulous planning and a sharp instinct for timing, they began to invest in property and development. It started modestly: a few homes here, a small commercial block there, a forgotten patch of land. But soon, these small projects began to connect, growing into entire communities. Every new foundation they laid was a promise, a testament to their belief that a single, powerful idea could grow into something truly lasting. Of course, progress was never a straight line. The world was rocked by turbulent, crippling economic downturns, waves of uncertainty, and dramatic shifts in social values. Yet, through it all, the family held their course. They continued to build. They learned to adapt, to diversify their efforts, and to understand that real, enduring success isn't about a single moment of luck. It's about resilience, plain and simple. It's about weathering the storm and coming out stronger on the other side. Brick by brick, the vision expanded. Construction sites, once quiet plots of land, now echoed with the sounds of hammers and saws, the soundtrack of a family's growing legacy. They weren't just building structures, they were creating stability. They were shaping the character of neighborhoods and giving physical form to ambition itself. Their story was a mirror, reflecting the broader transformation of a nation. It was a time when the children of immigrants were becoming entrepreneurs, when small, family-run enterprises were blossoming into major industries. It was an era when dreams once whispered in quiet villages across the ocean were now being made visible for all to see. Etched in stone and steel against the sky, through decades of tireless effort, the family name began to carry a certain weight. It became synonymous with reliability, with quality, and with steady, confident growth. These weren't just business principles. They were values passed down like precious heirlooms. Each project they undertook was more ambitious than the last, and every success served as a powerful reminder of just how far they had come from that small, distant European village. Yet, even as their influence expanded and their reputation grew, the spirit of that original journey remained at their core. The quiet, unshakable rules of their success were simple: hard work, perseverance, and an absolute refusal to give up, no matter the obstacle. For them, progress was never an accident. It was built, layer by layer, one deliberate decision at a time. By the middle of the 20th century, their developments had come to define entire communities. Streets that were once barren and forgotten were now lined with homes, each one representing a new beginning for another family. In every foundation they poured and every wall they raised, you could see a reflection of the first dreamer's courage, that unwavering belief that the future is not something you wait for, but something you build. It was no longer just the story of one family. It had become part of the story of the nation itself, living example of how vision and persistence could transform open land into thriving neighborhoods, and turn hope into something tangible you could reach out and touch. What began as a single man's dream had now become a legacy, forged in concrete and brick. And from that powerful foundation, a new generation was about to rise, one that would take this legacy and build it even higher, reaching for the sky. The world was rebuilding. The mid-20th century was a time of breathtaking speed, of reinvention, of cities expanding and reaching for the sky. The race to define modern skylines had begun. And for one family, a family whose roots began in modest foundations, this was their moment to dream bigger. They were ready to transform construction from a mere necessity into an art form, and their business into a lasting legacy. They had mastered the rhythm of growth, understanding the patience required for planning, the courage needed for risk, and the discipline essential for execution. But now, their ambition demanded more. The second generation had successfully built homes and entire neighborhoods. The next generation, however, they sought to build symbols, landmarks, that would stand as bold declarations of what was possible. Urban life was transforming before their very eyes. Towers of gleaming glass and steel began to replace the low rooftops that had characterized earlier decades. The skyline became a mirror, reflecting human aspiration. And in that vertical landscape, this family saw their opportunity. They began to move upward, both literally and figuratively. Their projects grew larger, more ambitious, more daring. What started as simple housing developments soon evolved into sprawling complexes, luxurious hotels, and grand, attention-grabbing buildings. The goal was no longer just to construct spaces, but to create powerful statement places that spoke of ambition, of progress, and of an unshakable confidence in the future. Soon, the family name started appearing on the sides of these magnificent buildings, and with it came recognition. The idea that success could be visible, that personal achievement could literally shape the horizon, became a core part of their identity. But behind every shining facade was the same unwavering philosophy that had carried them from the very beginning: relentless hard work, resilience in the face of adversity, and a fearless willingness to meet any challenge head-on. Each new project brought invaluable lessons, not just about business, but about vision. Some ventures thrived beyond their wildest dreams, others faltered. Yet, even the setbacks became part of their journey, teaching them that true, meaningful growth comes not from achieving perfection, but from sheer persistence. They understood something timeless: every generation must redefine what success means for its era. Where one generation had built homes for workers, the next built iconic structures for entire cities. Where one had sought stability, the next pursued distinction and honor. In time, the family's influence extended far beyond the world of construction. Their work began to intersect with culture, shaping architecture, influencing media, and even defining a part of the national identity. Their name was no longer just a business label. It had become a symbol of a way of thinking, bold, unapologetic, and laser-focused on the future. But with great success came great scrutiny. The higher their buildings rose, the more the public looked upward, not just to admire, but to analyze and to question. In an earlier age, wealth and influence were private matters. Now, they were front and center in the public conversation. The family's story had grown beyond their control, becoming woven into a larger narrative about ambition, wealth, and power in the modern world. Still, they kept building. They built through economic recessions, through massive cultural shifts, and through moments of profound change. Every new addition to the skyline, every newspaper headline, every calculated risk they took was just part of a generational pattern. Constant reinvention, powered by unwavering perseverance. By the end of the century, their family name had become synonymous with both spectacular success and public spectacle. Towers stood in their honor, and countless stories were written about their sprawling empire. But at its core, the essence of their legacy remained unchanged, a simple belief that has guided them from the start. Possibility has no ceiling, and to truly reach for the sky is to define your own place in history. As the 20th century turned a new page, success was no longer something you could just count in a bank account or measure in square footage. A new kind of currency was emerging, one that lived in the minds of the public. It was about perception, how people saw you, what they remembered about you, and how they connected to your name. For a family that had built its fortune from the ground up, literally from steel and stone, the next great structure they had to build was something entirely different. It was an image. The world was rapidly entering the age of media. Influence could now spread faster than concrete could dry. Television, newspapers, and eventually the internet became the new battlegrounds of ambition. And this family, they got it. They understood it before almost everyone else. They realized that public attention, when harnessed with a clear purpose, could be just as powerful, if not more so, than wealth itself. So, they started to consciously cultivate a presence. Every interview, every photograph, every grand opening wasn't just an event. It was a carefully staged performance. Each one was an opportunity to reinforce their story, a narrative of success, confidence, and absolute control. This wasn't about vanity, it was pure strategy. They were mastering the new architecture of fame. while the generations before them had built homes for communities. This new generation was building an identity for the entire nation to see. They embraced the bold, the glamorous, and the unmistakable. Their name was already on buildings, but soon it was on products, on new ventures, and in the stories people told. Each move extended the reach of their brand, transforming it from a simple signature on a contract into a powerful symbol of aspiration. But influence, just like architecture, demands a delicate balance. With public fascination came both incredible admiration and harsh criticism. Every success was magnified, but every misstep echoed just as loudly, if not louder. Yet, they learned not just to survive in that noise, but to thrive in it. They started to use attention itself as a form of currency. They understood something that few others did at the time. In this modern world, a reputation could be built faster than a skyscraper. But it could also come crashing down just as easily. To maintain it, you had to constantly reinvent yourself. And so, they evolved. They moved seamlessly from the skyline to the television screen, from real estate to reality. They turned visibility into an art form. Every project, every appearance, every public moment was another brushstroke on the ever-expanding portrait of a family that had truly mastered the rhythm of the times. What made their story so remarkable wasn't just their success, but their endurance. It was their uncanny ability to stay relevant in a world that was constantly shifting beneath their feet. They weren't just reacting to trends. They were the ones setting them. The family name had grown into something far more than just a business. It had become a story, one told in every home, in every city, and in every headline. It came to symbolize a distinctly modern kind of power, the power to be seen, to influence, and to shape narratives that reached far beyond the physical world of brick and mortar. But power, once you've earned it, must be constantly maintained. And as the 21st century dawned, the next chapter of their story would no longer be about what they built, but about what they represented. A new generation was rising, ready to carry that legacy forward, not just in architecture or commerce, but on a global stage. Every dynasty has its turning point. For one family, their empire was built from the ground up, towers scraping the sky, a name that echoed through cities. The old generation laid the foundations, stone by stone. But for those who inherited it all, the world was spinning on a different axis. The slow, deliberate pace of construction had been replaced by the blinding speed of information. Markets, media, technology, everything was changing. It was no longer enough to build structures. The new generation had to build relevance. Raised in the shadow of immense success, surrounded by towering expectations, they faced a question that haunted them. How do you write your own story when your last name is already a global brand? Some chose the well-trodden path, managing the properties, expanding the investments, and refining the business model that had secured their family's wealth. They were the keepers of the flame, ensuring the legacy would endure. Others, however, looked outward, craving independence. They ventured into fields far from real estate, determined to forge an identity entirely their own, free from the weight of their inheritance. But no matter which path they chose, one lesson from their predecessors remained etched in their minds. Visibility is power. The inheritors quickly understood that being seen, being heard, and being remembered could unlock doors faster than any key. They learned to navigate the treacherous waters of both the boardroom and the public eye, mastering the delicate dance between corporate strategy and personal style, blending hard-nosed business with captivating narrative. They weren't just building an empire. They were crafting a story the world couldn't look away from. And so, the family adapted, weaving their story into the very fabric of modern culture. Their lives became a fascinating mix of enterprise, entertainment, and identity. They didn't just learn to live in the spotlight. They learned to live through it, treating public attention not as a burden, but as their most valuable resource. The media, which once observed them from a distance, now depended on them for content. Every interview, every red carpet appearance, every candid photo turned their private lives into a subject of public fascination. Their story became a mirror reflecting our own conversations about wealth, fame, and what it truly means to succeed in the modern age. Behind the dazzling facade of cameras and headlines, the family's business was evolving at a breakneck pace. They diversified into new ventures, explored untapped global opportunities, and forged powerful partnerships that extended their influence far beyond their homeland. Every strategic move was a calculated gamble, a perfect balance of risk and recognition. It was the art of staying relevant in a world that never, ever stopped watching. But they knew legacy is more than just inheritance. It's a profound responsibility. As their name became synonymous with prestige and power, it also became a reflection of society's ever-changing values. Every decision carried immense weight. Every public appearance projected an image far larger than any single individual. They had reached the absolute pinnacle of influence. But such heights come with a steep price: constant scrutiny, crushing expectation, and the relentless pressure to not just match, but surpass the past. To lead now meant more than just succeeding. It meant evolving. It meant transforming the monumental legacy left to them into a new, visionary future for the generations yet to come. The story of this dynasty now stands at a familiar crossroads, caught between the solid foundations of what had been built and the uncertain horizons of what lies next. They mastered the art of being seen, but a new, more dangerous challenge was looming. When your name becomes your empire, what happens when the world begins to test its strength? By the dawn of the new century, the family name wasn't just found on deeds and contracts anymore. It was now illuminated across skylines, echoed through media channels, and whispered in the very language of ambition itself. Their legacy had evolved, shifting from the concrete world of construction to the abstract realm of communication, from tangible achievement to an undeniable cultural presence. They had mastered the physical world of towers and cities, but now influence demanded a new kind of architecture. One built not with steel and glass, but with perception, narrative, and reach. In this new era, they understood that attention was the ultimate currency, and they held plenty of it. Television became their primary stage. Every single appearance, every soundbite, every meticulously crafted image was designed to project an aura of supreme confidence, immense wealth, and unshakable certainty. They grasped a concept that few others did at the time. The modern world doesn't just admire success, it consumes it, and they were more than ready to give the audience exactly what it craved. The lines between reality and image began to blur. Business became a form of theater. Ambition transformed into entertainment, and the public found it impossible to look away. The family's story wasn't just being told anymore, it was being lived out in real time, broadcast across screens and headlines, spanning cities and generations. For millions, their name came to symbolize something far larger than just enterprise. It represented daring, unwavering self-belief, and the powerful idea that anything could be achieved with enough vision and persistence. To others, however, it represented the complex, often messy, nature of success, a testament to how wealth and image could both inspire and profoundly divide. But the family thrived in that tension. They had learned a crucial lesson of the modern age. In the era of influence, every reaction, Whether it was admiration or criticism, was fuel. They used attention the way others used capital, investing it strategically to expand their presence and, with it, their power. Their ventures soon spread beyond national borders. New towers rose in new countries. Strategic partnerships were formed in unfamiliar markets. What had once been a family business was now a global symbol, part brand, part myth, and part mirror reflecting the ambitions of a modern world. Yet, even amidst all the glamour and the global expansion, a deeper story was unfolding, one about transformation. For generations, they had been builders in the most literal sense. Now, they were constructing something far less tangible but infinitely more potent: belief itself. Influence became their new empire, an empire built not on land, but on loyalty, perception, and masterful storytelling. They had successfully turned visibility into a powerful force, one that could shape how people thought, how they spoke, and even what they dreamed of. But empires of influence, much like those built of stone and steel, must eventually face their test. Power inevitably attracts attention, but it also attracts challenge. The more visible you become, the more intensely the world watches, waiting for your next move, ready to scrutinize every decision. And as the 21st century began to accelerate, so did the pressure. Technology was changing faster than any legacy could adapt. Voices multiplied, narratives collided, and the very notion of control became more fragile than ever before. This brings us to a critical question. When influence becomes the empire itself, how do you protect it from the very world that helped you build it? For generations, the family's rise had seemed unstoppable. It was a classic tale of rags to riches, a steady, relentless climb from very humble beginnings to global recognition. Their name became synonymous with success. But, as we all know, history doesn't move in a straight line. It has its own rhythm, its own cycles, and no legacy, no matter how powerful, remains untouched by the winds of change. What had once been a shining symbol of limitless ambition was now entering a new era, a world where perception could be shattered in an instant, and the very influence they had built could turn into an unbearable weight of pressure. The turning point wasn't a single, dramatic event. There was no explosion, no single scandal that brought them down. It was far more subtle, a gradual shift that crept in through the headlines, through whispered opinions on social media, and through the ever-growing noise of a world that was more connected and more divided than ever before. The same global visibility that had once been the engine of their success now became their greatest vulnerability. They were exposed to a level of public scrutiny that previous generations could never have even imagined. It was as if they were living under a microscope, with millions of eyes watching their every move. Their name, once a badge of honor and a mark of quality, had become larger than their business, larger even than the family members themselves. It took on a life of its own. Every decision, every public statement, every casual word was amplified, dissected, and debated across the globe. The narrative they had so carefully constructed over decades, one of unwavering strength, endless prosperity, and absolute confidence, was suddenly being questioned. People started to pick it apart, to look for cracks in the facade. The family that had once defined what success looked like for everyone else was now being defined by how everyone else saw them. It was a complete reversal of power. And yet, this wasn't defeat. It was a transformation. Because they understood a fundamental truth that had driven them from the very beginning. Attention, whether positive or negative, is a form of power, and power can always be reshaped. So, true to their nature, they adapted once more. They were masters of evolution. Where others saw a storm of controversy, they saw an opportunity for a global conversation. Where others saw an insurmountable challenge, they saw a chance to pivot and grow stronger. They learned to navigate these new, treacherous waters not by hiding from the storms, but by sailing directly into them, facing the waves in plain view for all to see. Every challenge, every criticism, became a stage. It was another chance to redefine their story, to prove their resilience, and to rebuild their image on their own terms. As the world's gaze intensified, they didn't flinch. They leaned into it. The public could debate their image. They could argue about their motives. But one thing was certain: they could not be ignored. The family had become a mirror, reflecting something larger about our society, that constant tension between aspiration and judgment, between the individual and the legacy they carry. This was the ultimate test of everything they had built. The question was no longer whether they could rise, but whether they could endure. In the blistering heat of the spotlight, they discovered a new kind of strength, one that comes not from flawless perfection, but from sheer, unyielding persistence. This turning point wasn't the end of their story. It was the moment the story itself changed shape, bending into something new. The dynasty that had built towering skyscrapers and sprawling estates was now building resilience. Not from steel and concrete, not from stocks and bonds, but from something far more intangible: presence. It was the ability to simply remain, to adapt, and to endure when the very foundations of the world began to shift beneath their feet. For the first time, the family's journey wasn't just about power or ambition anymore. It was about legacy under pressure. They were no longer just symbols of success, they had become symbols of survival. But every transformation carries a cost. When reinvention becomes the only way forward, how much of your legacy do you leave behind to save it? The world that had once celebrated the family's rise was changing faster than ever. The systems they had mastered, business, media, influence, were no longer the same. Technology had completely rewritten the rules. The spotlight, once a tool they could command at will, now belonged to everyone. Every voice could be amplified, and every image could spread across the globe in seconds. For this family, however, this wasn't a sign of decline. It was evolution. They had weathered shifting worlds before: economic crashes, political upheavals, and cultural revolutions. Reinvention was simply in their blood. And so, as new generations stepped onto the world stage, they began to reshape not only their business empire, but the very essence of their story. The change started quietly, almost imperceptibly. A strategic move into new industries, a focus on new audiences, and a search for new ways to connect. Real estate remained their solid foundation, but innovation became their compass. They learned to speak the fluent, fast-paced language of a digital world, a world where influence was measured not in accumulated wealth, but in reach, not in physical property, but in digital presence. The family's story transformed into one of remarkable adaptation. They pivoted from being builders of grand structures to becoming builders of identity. They understood a profound truth about our modern age. In a time of constant, overwhelming noise, genuine meaning is the rarest and most valuable resource of all, and those who could create it, who could offer it to the world, would be the ones to lead. Public perception began to shift once again. The same family name that had once been a synonym for immense wealth now started to represent something different: endurance. It became a testament to how ambition could survive, and even thrive, through one reinvention after another. They were no longer just participants in their country's story. They had become a living metaphor for it. Their ventures evolved in fascinating ways: new platforms, new partnerships, and new generations finding their own unique voices. Yet, Each bold move carried echoes of the first dreamer's journey. That courageous act of leaving the familiar behind to create something far greater. The only difference now was the scale. The frontier wasn't a vast, untamed continent. It was the entire world itself. And with each reinvention, of course, came both tremendous opportunity and immense risk. The family knew better than anyone that fame is a double-edged tool. It can build as easily and as powerfully as it can break. The challenge was no longer just about being seen. It was about being truly understood. The goal was to stand for something that transcended mere fortune and became an enduring part of the culture itself. Their transformation perfectly mirrored the era we live in, fast, unpredictable, and undeniably global. What began as a family of builders had become something more abstract, more powerful, an idea. The idea that identity, once rigidly defined by legacy and the past, could be endlessly redefined by courage and vision. Through every cycle of rise and renewal, they proved a fundamental truth that has defined human progress since the very beginning, that survival belongs not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. But reinvention is never finished. For every empire reborn, a question remains. Can the future honor the past without being trapped by it? From a single dreamer who crossed an ocean to a global name recognized across continents, the family's story became something greater than wealth, greater than fame. It became a reflection of the human drive to build, to adapt, and to leave something meaningful behind. But, as the decades turned and the world barreled into a new age, the very concept of legacy itself began to change. We now live in a time when fame fades faster than a trending topic, when entire generations rise and fall with the speed of technology. In this world, the meaning of endurance has taken on a new, more profound depth. It's no longer measured only in towering buildings or vast fortunes. Today, legacy is about influence, ideas, and inspiration. What will remain after the headlines are gone? What lessons will echo through time, long after the noise has faded? For this family, the answer wasn't found in their skyscrapers or their sprawling enterprises, but in their pattern, the rhythm of their resilience. They had shown, time and time again, that identity could be rebuilt from the ashes, that success could be completely reimagined, and that even under immense pressure, ambition could evolve into something new. They became living proof that reinvention is not the opposite of tradition, it is its most vital continuation. As the next generation came of age, they began to look at the family name not just as an inheritance, but as a challenge. The goal was no longer about maintaining power. It was about defining a new purpose. What does it mean to carry forward a name that has meant so many different things to so many people? And more importantly, what does it mean to be remembered, not for where you came from, but for what you chose to create next? The answer, perhaps, is that a true legacy is never built just once. It's built again and again, every single time someone chooses to push beyond the limits of what is expected of them. The family's story, which journeyed from quiet, forgotten villages to global headlines, is the story of that continual motion, a relentless refusal to stand still. Now, in a world where the future is being rewritten every day by new voices and new tools, their story stands as both a powerful example and a stark warning. It reminds us that progress and preservation must coexist, that the great challenge of every era is not to replace the past, but to build upon its foundations. You can't have one without the other. The skyscrapers still rise toward the clouds, and the family name still echoes in the halls of power. But the meaning behind it all has grown. What once stood for raw ambition now stands for hard-won endurance. What once symbolized flashy success now speaks to the grit of survival. The true legacy lives on, not in the marble lobbies or the glass facades, but in the enduring belief that dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem, are always worth building. It's a belief that fueled a dynasty and continues to inspire us today. And so, the story circles back to its very beginning, to one journey, one decision, one incredible leap of faith across a vast ocean. Everything that followed, all the triumphs, the reinventions, and the challenges can be traced back to that single act of courage. It's an act that defines not only one family, but the spirit of every generation that dares to begin again, to tear down and rebuild, to chase a vision only they can see. Because every story of greatness eventually becomes history, and the question that remains is never how it was built, but what it will inspire next. Every great story leaves behind more than just names and dates. It leaves behind momentum, a powerful, unseen force that carries generations forward, shaping those who come after. Think of a family that once built homes and towers. Today, they are a symbol, not just of what they achieved, but of what they represented, the unending pursuit of what's possible. Their journey was never just about fortune. It was about belief. The belief that a powerful vision can outlast any circumstance, that sheer determination can overcome any doubt. Across decades and continents, this belief became their true inheritance. An invisible heirloom passed down from one era to the next, a spark that could never be extinguished. As the 21st century unfolds, that same spirit of ambition is all around us. New innovators rise where great builders once stood. Modern visionaries craft digital worlds instead of physical cities. The tools have changed, but the rhythm is exactly the same. That relentless pulse of progress that began the moment one person decided to reach far beyond what seemed possible. History doesn't end, it transforms. The echoes of past ambition ripple through time, reshaping themselves in every new dreamer who dares to start over. The world this family helped to shape continues to expand, built now by countless others who share the same unspoken creed that destiny belongs to those who refuse to stop building. In every skyscraper that touches the clouds, in every company that disrupts an industry, in every new idea that challenges convention, you can find a trace of that first spark, the raw courage to take action. Their story is no longer about just one family. It's about the eternal human pattern of creation and renewal. It's about the power of legacy, not as a static memory, but as perpetual motion, something that constantly moves forward, generation after generation. Their empire may have changed its shape, but its essence endures. It lives on in those who dream of more, who push boundaries, and who take risks even when the path ahead is completely uncertain. Because ambition, once it's awakened, doesn't just disappear, it echoes, calling out for others to follow its call. In a way, the greatest monument they ever built wasn't made of glass or gold. It was the simple, powerful example they left behind, that the greatest risk in life is to simply stand still. And so, as new dreamers rise, and our world continues to shift, the echoes of ambition remain invisible, yet utterly unstoppable, guiding each new generation toward its own impossible horizon. But even echoes can grow louder, and somewhere, in another time, another name will rise to carry that same relentless call forward. The world that once belonged to builders of stone and steel now belongs to creators of ideas and technology. Yet, the essence remains the same. The courage to imagine something that doesn't yet exist and to turn it into reality. The torch has been passed, but its flame burns with the same hunger, the hunger to shape the future. The new builders are everywhere. They don't wear hard hats or stand on construction sites. They build with code, with creativity, with vision. Their tools are digital. Their blueprints are written in data and dreams. And yet, at the heart of everything they do, beats the same rhythm that guided the generations before them, the belief that progress is an act of will. They live in an age of endless possibility. The boundaries between nations, industries, and ideas have blurred. A thought shared today can become a movement tomorrow. A single innovation can redefine how billions of people live and work. But with that power comes the same timeless test. Can ambition remain human? Can progress keep its soul? The story of legacy is no longer about one name or one family. It's about a mindset. The builders of the past shaped the world's cities. The builders of today are shaping its future. The form has changed, but the challenge is eternal: to dream beyond comfort, to create beyond necessity. These new creators draw inspiration from those who came before, from those who dared to fail publicly, to rise again, and to see opportunity where others only saw limits. They understand that every invention, every new world, begins with a moment of defiance, the refusal to accept things as they are. And just as the original dreamers once transformed open land into a sprawling city skyline, today's innovators transform imagination into influence, shaping not only what we see, but how we think. But the more the world accelerates, the clearer the lesson becomes. Progress without purpose is hollow. The great builders of history didn't create only for profit. They created for meaning. They built to be remembered not for their names, but for the world they left behind. That is the inheritance the new generation carries: not wealth, not fame, but the responsibility to continue the human story of creation. To look at the unknown not with fear, but with possibility. Because what defines us, generation after generation, is not what we own, it's what we dare to build. And so the cycle begins, a Guiana, new age of dreamers, armed with new tools, standing at the same crossroads of hope and ambition, ready to leave their mark on the world once more. We live in an age unlike any before. From sprawling digital worlds to the dawn of artificial intelligence, from the dreams of private spaceflight to the promise of renewable power, innovation has become our new frontier. The battleground isn't land anymore, it's imagination. And the heroes, they are no longer soldiers or kings. They are the thinkers, the coders, the creators, who dare to see what others can't. This is the true legacy of ambition, an evolution of vision itself. The same raw determination that once laid down railroads and raised skyscrapers now builds invisible networks of information, connecting billions in an instant. The courage that once conquered oceans now gazes toward the galaxies. Humanity's tools have changed, but our fundamental purpose remains eternal: to go further, to reach higher, to understand more. Yet, with every giant leap forward, a quiet question echoes in the background. How much progress is too much? When our innovation outpaces our wisdom, the line between creation and consequence begins to blur. For every breakthrough that brings light, another can cast a long shadow. Technology has given us power once reserved for gods, the power to create, to alter, to redefine reality itself. But with that power comes a profound responsibility. Can we learn restraint? Can we guide our creations with a moral compass? Every invention carries a story. Behind every complex algorithm, there is a choice. Behind every incredible machine, there was once a dreamer. This age of innovation isn't just about what we can do. It's about what we should do. The new builders of our world must balance incredible power with a clear purpose, breathtaking speed with deep understanding. The future they're building won't just shape industries, It will shape entire generations of thought, defining what it means to be human. It's easy to look at progress and see only the brilliant shine of achievement. But we must remember that every age of greatness is born from struggle, from challenge, from doubt. The innovators of this century stand at a threshold, the very same one crossed by the visionaries of the past who faced their own monumental questions. So, the question isn't whether they will change the world. That's a given. The real question is whether they will make it better. And so, the rhythm of ambition continues, faster, louder, and more connected than ever before. Humanity's reach now extends from the deepest data networks hidden from sight to the farthest, most distant stars. Yet beneath all of this complexity, all of this breathtaking progress, lies the same simple, human truth. Creation without meaning is just noise. It is purpose that transforms progress into a lasting legacy. As technology continues to reshape what it means to live, to work, and to dream, one truth remains absolutely constant. Progress doesn't belong to the machines. It belongs to us. It belongs to those who dare to imagine what comes next. Because the future isn't waiting to be discovered. It's waiting to be built, and the blueprint is still being written. Power, it's the force that builds nations, launches industries, and shapes the destiny of millions. But look closer, beyond the monuments and the milestones, and you'll find a simple, unyielding truth. Ambition always comes with a cost. The story of humanity's rise, from the first builders of stone to the modern architects of code, is also a story of a silent struggle between creation and conscience. Throughout history, the pursuit of greatness has always walked hand in hand with sacrifice. We see it in families torn apart by a singular vision, in nations divided by ideology, in innovators burdened by the very empires they worked so hard to build. Think about it. The higher a tower rises, the deeper its foundations must be dug. And sometimes those foundations are laid in sleepless nights, lost relationships, and forgotten values. It's the hidden price of progress, the personal toll behind public triumph. At the center of it all lies the human heart, the true engine of power. It's a paradox, isn't it? Capable of immense compassion, yet also capable of destructive pride. This brings us to a question that echoes through every age. Does ambition serve humanity, or does humanity ultimately serve ambition? For some, power is a tool to build a better world. For others, it becomes a mirror, reflecting only what they fear to lose, twisting their purpose into a defense of their own ego. True legacy isn't written in wealth or influence. It's written in impact. It's measured by how the world changes for the better because someone dared to lead. But leadership without empathy can hollow out even the grandest vision, leaving behind an empty shell. History remembers the builders and the dreamers. But it also remembers the cautionary tales, those who rose too high, too fast, and along the way forgot why they started their journey in the first place. Now, let's fast forward to our modern world. A world where influence spreads faster than truth, and where power can be gained with a single viral post. The test of character has never been greater. Today's empires aren't built on land, but on attention, the new currency of control. The same ambition that once forged steel now shapes minds. And the struggle for dominance has moved from physical battlefields to digital algorithms. But even in this digital storm, something timeless remains. Humanity's greatest strength has never been its inventions. It's our capacity for reflection, the ability to pause, to question, to remember that progress without purpose is empty, and power without a heart is fragile. It's our unique ability to look back at our own creations and ask, is this truly making us better? Every great figure, Every dynasty eventually faces this moment, the critical turning point between a lasting legacy and a sudden downfall. In the end, it's not about what they built, but whether they built something worth inheriting. Because true legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about being understood. The heart of every era beats with the same contradiction. The ambition that lifts us higher, and the pride that threatens to pull us all back down. The balance between these two forces decides the fate of empires and of those who lead them. And as the world steps into its next great transformation, one question remains: can power and purpose finally exist side by side, or will history repeat its oldest lesson once more?